So, hello everybody, it's me, Ken, and I'm here with Miranda Macpherson in The Window.
Yeah.
It's a lovely venue here in Angel, in London. And today is the end of the second day of a 3-day workshop. And it's quite funny because we're speaking to a fresh audience here.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like, just minutes ago, there were dozens of at least 2 dozen people here having a really...
More than that, actually. I think there's been about 50 people.
50 people.
Yeah.
There were all these people who were doing deep excavation, right?
Right.
Deep ego excavation under this being held very gently by what I see is your energy and your style. And we've had interviews. We've had two one interview and one hangout, but never really seen what it is that you do. And you were just saying to me earlier, that you have to see it to believe it. I've seen it.
You have to experience it.
Yes.
Right. So what's really the retreat that we've been going on is titled Unshakable Presence. And so what I'm most interested in is actually guiding people into direct experience of the unshakable ground of our true nature, or God.
Mm.
And it's actually not that difficult. The work is on seeing clearly and relaxing the usual structures and strategies and defenses of our ego.
Mm.
And meeting that without trying to fix it or change it or get rid of anything. And so it's quite practical. And so what I'm doing is setting up a structure, offering a presence. So I'm sitting in that presence, and it's a palpable field, if you like, and demonstrating that presence through the way I'm being and speaking about it and guiding people in to see what's actually there when they look directly at themselves.
Mm.
And they don't try and fix or change it or do anything about it.
Mm.
They practice
being
absolutely here and undefended and inquiring what's really here and who's truly here.
Yeah, and I think I have to be careful here because my intellectual mind comes in and wants to
That's all right.
help bring it out into the
That's
space.
Fine. I'll do what you need to do.
But I think when you mentioned to me that, or it must have been one of your videos, that you bring about a very feminine way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I really saw that today, viscerally saw that, because I think in a lot of advisor, a lot of this non-dual stuff, it tends to be very violent.
Macho.
Masculine.
Yeah. And so I see that's, perhaps it works for some, but it's a little limited. And in a way, having been around deep spiritual practice, for many years myself, and practiced with an Advaita and practiced Zen Buddhism for a while too, and what I've come to see from my own experience, both with myself and with working with people, is that hammering away aggressively at the ego doesn't work. It causes more problems.
Mm.
Because if we are trying to aggressively get rid of the ego, we have to then ask, well, who is that that's trying to annihilate something? And we see that actually it's the superego, absorbing spiritual teachings, trying to kill off its sense of self. Which is interesting. So we see that actually that is an act of aggression that strengthens what the problem is.
Mm.
And that when we bring what I call a more feminine approach, which is when we look directly at the ego structures, but with compassion, with understanding, seeing it for what it actually is without making any judgments, without even trying to fix or change it, when we're actually just there with a compassionate allowing, then just in the same way that ice melts in the presence of the sun, so there's a relaxation that happens of the structures of our ego. Because if we really look at what the ego is, it's disconnection. And part of why we got disconnected was that we felt usually some absence of love. We felt disconnected from what it was that we truly needed, which is the human condition. So what's really needed is deep love and compassion for our humanity, for the fact that our ego is really like the structures of a young child, of a disconnected young child, which is a deep suffering. It's incredibly difficult to be so vulnerable and so little and so dependent, and to actually feel separate. It's incredibly stressful.
Yeah, that's...
It's no wonder we develop these defenses and structures that are about trying to hold ourselves. That's the best we can do in that stage of our development. And as we see it like that, there's a natural compassion.
Yeah, and we did a lot of exercises today that went back to that place. And, for me personally, I went through so much stuff in my childhood that I never saw. But the funny thing is, in your work, it comes out in a more fluid way. I think in other works, you identify a very specific incident in your childhood where, mommy hit you when you went near the stove or something. But in what happened here, I feel like it wasn't on an energetic level. I don't know how to describe this, but do you know what I mean? And that was very unique for me. Very, very unique to see.
So was that in the question? So for the sake of the viewer, one of the things that we looked at this morning was 3 repeating questions. The first one was an inquiry into the ways in which you get disconnected. And I was saying, we can get disconnected from all kinds of aspects of our true nature, because our true nature isn't a one-dimensional thing. God is all love, all kindness, all power, all strength, all support, all courage, all intelligence. So all value, intrinsic value. It's boundless of all of these things, right? And so that we can get disconnected sometimes, especially from a sense of intrinsic value, or we can get disconnected from power or goodness or love or support. And of course, the ways in which we experience the disconnection usually happens around primary relationships with mother, father, because in that stage of our development, as our ego is forming, it's forming around those relationships and what happens. And then, of course, with an experience of disconnection from love or support or value, what happens then is we get stuck in a particular contraction, and then we make a meaning about who we are because of that state. And the meaning is usually some very contracted self-concept, and it's part of what we naturally do to survive a painful experience that's
like, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, like I'm not good enough, like I'm nothing, like I'm wrong, like I'm not lovable, like I'm no good, like I'm, I'm defective.
Yeah, you name it.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on and on and on. But I've never met a human being in any culture that I work with, and I've worked across Eastern and Western cultures, that doesn't have this. And of course, in Miracles calls this the concept of sin, which is the experience that something's wrong with me, and it's an experience that sense of self we come to that's a manifestation of our disconnection. It's the meaning we give our separation. We turn it into a personal identity. So I'm not focusing on telling the story about what happened, although there's relevance to that, but it's beyond the scope of what we can do in 2 days. I'm interested in how exactly did you get disconnected and from what? And what did you make that mean? How did that build into an identity that's split off from the totality?
And can you do this on your own?
Yes, absolutely. You see, all of these questions that I'm taking people through, of course, these are questions that we can reflect on and feel our way into. And actually, where this is building to, next, where we're going tomorrow, to give you a little hint,
Exciting.
is what exactly do I have to do, think, believe, and reject to keep my story of separation intact?
Repeat that one time.
What exactly do I need to think, believe, reject, and deny to keep my separate sense of self intact?
So it's all the things that you're pushing away.
Well, all the doing. Because once we feel separate and we feel the fear and it coalesces into an identity, what happens next is the separate self then goes on a mission, feels I'm all alone and it's all up to me and I have to somehow fix this or deal with it myself. And then it goes on a search. Okay, how am I going to deal with this and fix it and cope? And there's not a questioning of is this even real? There's an immediate, I'm the doer and I have to make it work. Right. So that's a further layer of development of our defense structures, our habits. But of course, with every defense that we activate, guess what happens? It further coalesces the disconnection and the separate self. So it's also important to see, what is it exactly that I'm doing that's holding my separate sense of self intact? But of course, what you're pointing to is that I'm inviting people to look very directly into the mechanics of their ego structure and to practice these principles that are quite universal that I call the pillars of awakening.
So I just want to pause there and come back to what we actually did in pairs to give the viewers a sense of what we did, because we're talking about it in terms of the broad outline. But tell us what actually happened.
Okay. Well, last night we started with an inquiry into trust. So one of the things that I've seen is that if the work, spiritually speaking, is surrender, then surrender is not going to happen. Surrender of our ego structures is impossible if there's not much trust. If we're trusting in our ego's version of reality only, then we can't open, it's not possible. So I always start with opening up the field of trust in the room and helping people cultivate a sense of trust that there's some goodness, there's loving presence, there's support, there's a holding, it's safe. People have to feel that, or we can't open no matter how much we want to. So we start with an inquiry last night into trust. And firstly, looking at our limitations for trust. What limits your capacity to trust? And letting whatever that is for each individual come up. And of course, what generally comes up is fears from the past, difficult things that have happened, hurts, heartbreaks, feelings of not being held, of not being safe, the woundings that occurred, and the assumptions that we created on how life is and how we have to be based on those past things. So just letting them be exposed, letting them breathe.
And the other person he just is the witness.
The other person actually offers presence. So presence is very, very healing. Presence is just here, it's unconditional, it doesn't commentate, it doesn't judge, but it doesn't leave. And that's part of what's so powerful in the room, because I'm showing people how to be with themselves and with one another in a way that really genuinely does bring about healing and liberation. Mm. We really don't have to do anything, but we have to not leave, not exit. And that in and of itself is such a profound expression of love, because real love isn't conditional. It's completely free. Mm. So to have someone listen to us, not commentate, not judge, just be there completely with their whole being, is so liberating.
And it's so liberating for me to not need to respond.
Yeah, just to say thank you. And in the thank you, there's a lot. There's just an acknowledgement of what's been shared. There's just an acknowledgement. Nothing else. Just thank you.
Miranda, one of the things I really wanted to ask you, actually, and
so I'm coming back to your other question.
Sorry,
so last night, firstly the inquiry was what limits your capacity to trust. The person responds with whatever comes up. And then the next question was, what's holding you now? And that's very important, because that inquiry question shifts our attention from the past hurts and the past reasons for our closure and our holding on to the present moment. What's actually here holding you now? And if we're really honest about it, there's a lot. If we genuinely inquire deeply into that question, on the basic level we could see that there's a chair holding us now. Yep. There's a ground holding us now. It's unconditional. It doesn't demand we be any particular way.
And they're all representations of.
Right. If you go deeper, you see, well, there's air holding you. The air contains oxygen that brings nourishment to the body, without which we would not be alive. If we look outside, there's plant life that produces that oxygen. We don't have to do anything to produce it. The sun rises in the east and it sets in the west every day. We don't have to earn or deserve it. It just is. There's food, there's friendship, there's the warmth of human. There's so many blessings that exist in ordinary life that we usually don't take in, or we don't really see what they actually are and where they're really coming from, which is at the deepest level. It is the sustenance, like in the Course in Miracles, it says, I am sustained by the love of God. It says, over and over, this lesson must be repeated until you really accept that it is true. It is the answer to all fear. If we could really take in what's holding us now, we would see there is thunderous grace and nourishment and love and support present in each moment for our life. It's so thick with grace. And to consciously open to receive this and engage with it and take it in actually cultivates a very deep sense of trust. And trust feels like, I can be here. And it feels like love. It feels like a blessedness. It affects us in a way that's profoundly supportive, that makes us courageous and willing to look at things, to go into the unknown, see what's there. It brings a boldness, a robustness, that it'll be all right if we go into the unknown. It's not really so bad. It's okay. It's exciting, actually. So we start with trust because we need to open that up in order for people to feel sufficiently safe to look directly at their ego structure and see what's really going on there. What's really holding it together? What is it really? Don't dismiss your ego and try and get rid of it. Bring your awareness through it. So it's sword-like, uncompromising. Okay, tell them we'll be 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I really feel that being in this space and, making this video, because I know lots of people are going to love this video. And I'm just really feeling this moment,
What is this moment for you?
I think it's a place of service, and it's also a place of stillness. To be able to serve in the absolute stillness, it's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, to be doing videos on the internet, going to the far reaches of the earth, just from my flat.
Yeah. Right.
And that's such an honor, you know. It's such an honor, and to be doing this, to be here, to be in London, you know, and I'm provided for. You know, I have good meals to eat. I have great friends. You know, it's amazing. It's an amazing privilege.
Yeah.
I feel so privileged.
Right. And as you just be aware of that sense of privilege, if you be curious, well, that impetus, it feels like you can really feel your heart. Right. And notice how what's actually true in the depths of the heart that you can feel now has a deep generosity and love, and it wants to extend the goodness and share it with others.
Yeah. Because
you can actually feel that you're not separate from others, and so you want to share the blessings.
It's this aliveness that you don't find in buying a new pair of shoes, or you know, or you know, or eating good food is one thing, but you know, I mean, but service is a dimension which is so exquisite, so exquisite.
Yeah, for me too. It's a big part of why I love to do this work. There's just no joy comparable that I know than the joy of being with someone as they're starting to actually taste what it is that's really at the depth of themselves. Seeing them wake up and break out of those cages of unnecessary suffering and taste the palpable beauty and depth and majesty of who we all really are. There's just nothing better. It's so meaningful and precious. And there's no end to it. That's part of the joy that I keep learning. You know, in the course it talks about, you know, the teacher and the student, the fluidity, teaching and learning are one in truth. And I'm always learning more through extending the invitation to meeting what we really are. Every time I meet with people, I see more about what's really here and what really supports the process every time.
Miranda, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah.